Boom! Alright, welcome to the episode 21 of Take It Easy. 21. Today we've got an interview with Chris. Chris works for an OEM, has been involved in designing and manufacturing of cars for quite a long time, so we just thought we'd have an informal chat about, you know, how these things are actually done from perspective on another OEM. Thing is, most people, when they talk about car manufacturing these days, especially around EVs, we listen to His Holiness Elon Musk. But it's nice to talk to other people who've been in the industry for a very long time and get a different perspective. But before I get on with it, a couple of little announcements. So we've surpassed the 20 episodes, which is amazing. Today's episode is actually going to be divided into two separate episodes because we've just been talking for so long. Of other cool things, I've recently started an online merchandise store. This is like an experiment. I had some people asking me about my mugs and my t-shirts and hoodies that I've been wearing for a while that I've made just for myself with the podcast logo. But if you're interested in acquiring one, head over to a place called Teespring. There's going to be a link in the description, and search for Take It EV, and you know, see what if you like it. I'm open for feedback. This might be just a temporary thing, so grab it before it goes. Really, I don't know if it's going to work out or if I'm going to change it, move it somewhere else. I'm just this is a thing that I haven't tried before, so. But I hope you like it. And now, without further ado, let's turn over to Chris. Don't talk about Tesla too much, because I just hate everyone's talking about Tesla. I was hating that.
Oh, they're interesting.
I'm hoping that we can talk about, or you can explain to people how the whole thing works, how a car comes about. You know, what goes into it. Because from the EV owner's perspective, people seem to only kind of listen about these stories and been told how it happens from the sort of back, from the you know the other perspective. When it comes to Tesla, because obviously Elon Musk talks a lot about it, and he's very open in his presentations. But no other.
Yeah, he is and he isn't. With Tesla, it's really, really interesting, and you see it with people like Rival and Rivian and these other startups. But Tesla, it's very interesting when you watch what he's saying on when we watch the battery day, and when you're watching anything, trying to work out what is real, what is genuine innovation, and what is the sales pitch. And he's very, very, very good at mingling those two things and putting a little bit of information out there and then selling it, and it's wow, that's amazing. So the battery day, for example, with his tabless design cells, they said, wow, amazing, 50% more energy capacity, energy density, all these things. But actually, when you look at it and what he's actually done, all he's done on that battery cell, it's still a rolled donut cell, when there's like a jelly roll cell where they roll up the cell. But what they've done is just left the tabs at the top, cut them and folded them in, which is great. And it's great for cooling. It means you're not having to weld it because it's already in there. It's a nice little innovation. What it isn't is 50% improvement. But that gets all the interest, that generates his stock, investors are happy, all of these things, because he has to make sure that Tesla has money in the bank to keep on doing the things he wants to do to get to where he wants to be. Because at the moment, from a business perspective, they are still relying an awful lot on other OEMs paying the money for CO2 credits, and so from a bottom line automotive profit perspective, that's what they're relying on. So he's got to keep that going, and that's not to say they're not doing some really good stuff, because they are doing some really interesting stuff, especially on the ways of doing business, which is really, really fascinating. But it's like a little, you have to try and cut through the information that's true versus the information that is maybe a little exaggerated. The Cybertruck, I look at that with a professional hat on. I cannot see how that, as it was presented, will end up being on the road as a mass production vehicle. It's just I can't see it.
Well,
because
especially in Europe.
Oh, in Europe, unless. But this is where because at the moment we obviously have Euro NCAP and the safety stuff.
There's me trying to say let's not talk about Tesla too much, and we got in straight away.
I won't say too much about it. I don't mind saying too much. I just it's really interesting. I see Tesla from a different probably viewpoint of what I see a lot of people seeing it, which is interesting, at least.
Take it easy. Take it easy.
So, as you may have just heard, I've got a guest today on the podcast, and would you like to introduce yourself? Because I'm going to butcher it. Just say who you are, or you can say or cannot say, all the secrets, all non-secret stuff.
Absolutely no secrets. I'm Chris Miller. I currently work for Ford Motor Company. That saying, I am absolutely not representing Ford Motor Company. Everything on here is my very much my personal opinion. And my personal thoughts, but I have been working in the automotive industry for 16 years probably now. Started off in B-car planning, so sort of Fiesta size vehicles as an analyst, which was fascinating, and then moved into engine engineering. So I spent 5 years on component engineering for turbocharged engines, and then systems engineering, so the person who sort of pulls everything together, all of the different components, make sure they fit, make sure they work, and then sign it off and launch that into the world. And then I've moved into planning, and I started off in powertrain planning, but for the last 5-6 years I've been really sort of trying to move, and have been able to move my sort of career and responsibilities and what I want to do more towards the electrified side of it. So I got out of the combustion engine engineering side and development, and then I've moved into where I am now, which is commercial vehicle planning. And it probably comes as no surprise that probably the majority of people who are working on vehicles at the moment have certainly got an eye on EV. It's what I'm really interested in, and so that's where my interests lie at the moment. And I've lucky enough to work for a company that allows me to sort of indulge some of my interests. And you sometimes have to pinch yourself and think, wow, actually I get to go to work and talk about cars all day and work with cars all day and come up with ideas for cars all day, which is great. That's not to say there aren't on downsides when you're staring at an Excel page full of numbers and financials, but it's still very sort of privileged to be able to do what I do. So I'm actually, as I say, the commercial vehicle forward planning. So it's looking at what we'll be doing in anything from sort of 3 to 10 years and beyond. which is great to be part of. Which is great to be part of that.
Yeah, it sounds very interesting. Like most, like I was just saying to you on the pre-show, that most people seem to be getting their information from Elon Musk, or very unqualified and hyper excited journalists who have absolutely no engineering backgrounds and seem to repeat loads of very sounds very interestingly sounding ideas, but that are not really, I wouldn't say possible, but they seem to be scraping the reality sometimes, or just touching it a little bit, but not really being viable.
Yeah, it is a bit like that. Elon Musk is brilliant. He's absolutely fabulous at what he does. He does understand the technical. He understands the problems, but he's also very good at the salesman pitch of it and making sure that Tesla Motor Company always has the investment available and everything it needs and the excitement to push forward to that next thing, is to push forward so he can fund the next gigafactory, so he can have the investment to do the engineering for his next project. Because that's what he needs to keep on going. And I think it's really interesting to see Tesla now have very much moved from a relatively niche in volume wise, obviously not in company value wise, but in volume wise, product range wise, moved from a niche, relatively low volume manufacturer, and now they're moving up to the couple of 100,000 unit manufacturing sites, which every OEM across the world has got dozens of. And he's now coming up against the issues and the inertia that other OEMs have when you have to build 100,000, 200,000 vehicles to meet demand, and even more. So all that inertia that the VWs of the world have and everybody else is working against, that make OEMs and the industry as a whole potentially slow to turn around. He's coming up against that, and he's doing a really good job, I think, of trying to push it through. But it's a balance of coming out on top and getting the factory built, and still being able to build vehicles that are up to the quality that your customers, and crucially your next generation of customers, are going to be acceptable. Because warranty claims and everything cost a fortune and can wipe out the profit of a vehicle no problem when you're at that sort of volume. So I think everybody I speak to is all rooting for Tesla. We all look at what they're doing and think that's brilliant. We wish we could do. I wish I was Elon Musk. It would be brilliant to have a completely freedom of own car company. But it is really fascinating. But yeah, it's sometimes when you're having a look at what is real and what is marketing, is quite fun sometimes. As I was saying beforehand, that in the battery day, their new battery design, when the headline numbers look amazing, 50% more and all of those other things, and then when you actually look into the detail of what they're doing and how they're using their jelly roll cell, and just it's almost just by doing the calculations on the volume, it's a bigger cell, so it's got more power. The cooling design of the tabs is great, but it's not that suddenly they've got that 50% improvement in battery technology that everybody's sort of working to in incremental steps in one go. They haven't, but a lot of people would have walked away from that thinking, wow, they have. So it's not to say they're not making those steps, but what they're really good is drumming up the brand and making it, which is what they're going to need if they're going to continue on what they want to do.
Yeah, they had a massive amount of freedom compared to established OEMs in terms of the inertia, because like I say, when they're building a couple thousand vehicles a month, they can change things on the dime and shift things completely, like change the suppliers or change this type of component, that type of component. They don't have to do too much testing because the risk is much smaller. And obviously, when you have just one factory or two factories, it's just super easy. Where you have 20, that's a different idea.
Yeah, it's the jump from scale. If you're making 10,000 units and you're almost like a Ferrari type of size, you are making those a lot of the time slightly more handmade. You're making them down flexible manufacturing processes. You're maybe not using the massive $100 million stamping lines and other stuff you'd have to use. Also, all that massive investment that goes in up front. And VW talk about this a lot on how on their MQB platform they need they're going for scale so that they can make all of the parts for that with these big investment heavy, but once you've got the investment in there, they can churn out parts for very little, but it's a massive upfront cost. But they can only do that if they are running at capacity and it's at a high capacity. So once you make that jump from tens of thousands of units into that hundreds of thousands of units, suddenly the business equation, the balance will shift, that you need to be making a lot more, and suddenly you need to start spending a lot more on your investment because of the scale. So it's really, really interesting to see how Tesla are making that jump from small scale into having the inertia and investment. Their what do they say? The gigafactory is $1.5 billion. That's a lot of money to spend, and you need to sell a lot of vehicles and make a lot of money on those vehicles to do it. At least with Tesla, they're very good at making use of their batteries. So when they don't just sell their batteries into vehicles, they sell them into their Powerwalls. They sell them to governments like they did Australia. But they're really, really good at making sure that they maximize their battery capacity. But I think Elon Musk will be the first to tell you that the scaling up is the most difficult bit. Is coming up with a cool car is almost the easy bit. The making it for for not a lot of money effectively over and over again at high quality is really very difficult.
So from your perspective, as somebody who's been in the established OEM industry for a long time, what if you could describe to somebody in 10 minutes or less what goes into actually making let's just say EV but any car, how difficult is it? Why is it so complicated? It's just a car at the end of the day. Like, everyone looks at the car and they're thinking, it's just a car. Why does it cost 20, 30 whatever £1,000? It's just a couple of things slapped together.
If you think of it, what other consumer product, even if a car is 30, 40,000, think of the technology that's in that. Think of the battery. If you've got a 100 kilowatt hour battery and using Tesla's best $100, you've got $10,000 worth of battery in that vehicle, and then all the power electronics and all the inverters and all the DC and all the cooling and all the modules that control everything else, and then you've got all of the coding that goes into that. That is an immense amount of work, and it's also something that will drive you and your family down the motorway at 70, 80 miles an hour, depending which country you're driving in. And it has to do that safely. So you can't. The amount of work that goes into actually signing off, making sure it's safe, testing, double testing, making sure it's reliable, is just immense. And that's all of that stuff's done after I've finished with it. I'm in the upfront bit. I'm in the working out what is it going to be? What's the concept going to be? Then working with our the package team to work out what it's going to look like, where you're going to put the major bits. Almost from my perspective, from a commercial vehicle, it's almost easier because you know what your customers want, and your commercial vehicle customers are more knowledgeable than any customers out there. They know, you look on YouTube, look at anywhere, and you have very, very knowledgeable tradesmen who know about their vehicles. They know how they use them, what they wanted them to do, what they're going to put in them, how far they're going to drive them, all of that. it's the best customers to have because they're really knowledgeable, and you can almost say, okay, well, what do you want to do with it? Come up with a plan and work out what's the best tool for them. If you're making a passenger car, it's potentially a little bit more emotive. You can be a bit freer, and don't have to have the complexity. So that when Elon Musk comes out and says his next car is absolutely amazing, a lot of that feeling that that's amazing is because of the hype and the marketing, everything out of it, and you want it. Like, no, I'd love a Model 3, but if you actually have a look at it, it's relatively boring looking. It's a decent EV and it's fast, but it's like it's the hype around it which really makes it something you just want. Where if you're doing commercial vehicles, and this will be really interesting to see how the industry with the HGVs go. You've got people with very set drive cycles, very set usage patterns, very set things they want to do. So when you see Mercedes and MAN and all these other Scania looking at what they're doing with their big rigs, and Tesla with their truck, it's almost easier. You've got a list of things they're going to do. You should design something around that. But anyway, that's what it is. Going back to the start. We do all that, and then crucially we put together. I put together the business case, because it's great coming up with look at this amazing concept for a vehicle. Isn't it wonderful? If you can't come up with a way of building it, engineering it, and then selling it, that ultimately ends up making some money, you then don't have the investment back to do the next thing you want to do. And I think if you have a look at especially what VW are doing, I'm just going to go with VW because they've been quite open, they're quite far forward, and with their ID3 there's quite a lot of information on what they've been doing out there. They have I think $40 billion on they're going to spend $40 billion on EV and the MQB platform in the next 10 years. That money only comes because they can make money on other vehicles. That 40 billion doesn't come from nowhere. So you have to generate the money in order to invest the money, and that's sort of an onward cycle. No one's in the automotive industry to make ridiculous amounts of money. The margins are thin. The work's hard. Investments is high. It's not. People are in there because they want to do it, and Elon Musk is in there because he wants to. He personally has obviously made a lot of money out of it from the share price, but generally it's not a high margin. And as you see Tesla now and other OEMs looking at more and more and getting sort of revenue streams through other services. So Tesla will sell you can have your vehicle autopilot enabled, or have whatever it is, and you can go, I would really like this feature, and they will sell it to you, and they'd get revenue that way. So you're they've got sticky customers. They make money from their customers all the way through, rather than sort of the traditional route where a customer would come, buy it up front, and then you might see them for servicing. Yeah. But so that's really interesting to see what Tesla are doing in that world. But that's what any startup EV company is. That's what they're looking at. They're looking at, okay, we will do the vehicle, but here all the other stuff, the updates, the subscriptions to the charging network and other things. It's looking at that whole sort of a different model, which it's not just Tesla who's doing it. Everybody's looking at that sort of thing, which is makes it quite interesting.
It's almost easier at the beginning when you only target, companies like Tesla only target a specific niche. They target people who will buy that vehicle even if it doesn't have plush interior, and even if it has a squeaky dashboard that squeaks when you press the accelerator, as some of the older Model S's and Model X's did. But it's obviously much harder when you're an established OEM, and customers, especially in case of the utility vehicles, where you've got more picky customers who actually want a tool, and if the tool they will buy another tool probably from a different OEM. So it's obviously much harder crowd to please than your average Tesla customer.
It's. I think it's the only way that if you're going to get into the auto industry, is the only way is to spot a niche and go for it, because the investment is so high, the time frames are so long that you really have to focus on what they're good at. And you see that with Rivian, who I think he's a was it MJ, whatever his name is he's really smart on the way he's done that with getting Amazon on board, because he's got himself there guaranteed sales income that then he can use to fund the next generation. But he's focusing on that perspective on, okay, what does Amazon want? One customer, literally just one customer, and starting from there. So you can focus on that, do that really well, and then build from there. And Arrival as well. Arrival, which we see on the Fully Charged show, their van, which is actually their beta version of the van, alpha version of the van. Their beta version of the van, they've moved the cab back over the seats, which they've released recently, and that's looking at they signed a contract with Royal Mail and UPS. And that's okay. Well, they're two that's a very niche customers. And then when Tesla started, they started off with the Roadster, and they went after those niche EV customers. And with the Model S, really, it was the EV customers. It was really the only viable, decent EV out there at the time. So it had anybody who wanted an EV and had the money to spend on an EV, your only option at the time was a Model S. I
am in the sort of category of geeks who like technology. I'm not the sort of person who buys everything. One of the reasons I started looking at an EV is because my diesel car at the time, when I moved to London, I've been doing only short journeys, and the engine started basically failing quite often, or all this sort of auxiliary, because it was a diesel car, all the sort of auxiliary, sensors and whatnot. Diesel engines seem to be very complicated for what they are.
They are very, very complicated.
I know. Specifically, I know quite a lot of people around here who actually own Fords, are very loyal to Ford as a brand. But obviously this isn't, we're not talking about Ford, just about OEMs in general. But compared to people like myself and other sort of EV enthusiasts, what do you think is going to bring them, apart from government obviously telling them to do it, what do you think is going to entice them to transition into EVs before the phase out of ICE cars? What do you think? What do you think will have to happen for that to go ahead?
I always have a hunch that it will go faster than a lot of people predicting. The issue is that still an EV you can usually buy. If you're going to buy a new EV, it's still expensive. It's still a lot. It's still a lot of money. Even like a Model 3 on the lease is something like £550, £600 a month, and then you've got everything else. So there's still only a chunk of the population who are going to be in that sort of position to do that still. You've got
Zoe's and you've got MGs as well, because I have to mention them, because if I say if we say Tesla, everyone's going to be like
but there are other ones coming like, but that's still it's still expensive for the amount of car you get. And if you're used to getting, and you see people still have cars to do things, to do jobs, to take people places, to carry stuff, and the small Nissan EV, it doesn't carry as much necessarily. It doesn't go the range, and range is still the number one. It still is. You speak to anybody, you speak to anybody online, and I've done quite a few Twitter polls on when do you think you'll transition over to EV, or when would you buy your last petrol or gasoline vehicle, and it's still range. Range is the one that comes up. So it's really well, what about the charging network and all that? Well, I think almost people need to be able to see. So when I think Vauxhall doing this 48-hour test drive on the e-Corsa. I think it's Vauxhall. I'm just someone else, but they're giving them to people so they can go and say, well, actually, yeah, I do. It's easy charging at home, or it's easier. I can charge it here, and I think it's just getting that through, that it doesn't have to be exactly like your gasoline vehicle or your diesel vehicle. It's different. Yeah. You charge it little and often. You top it up when you get to somewhere, or you top it up at home. But what you're not doing is driving 400 miles, going to a certain place, filling up in one go, and leaving. So it's the behaviour, and no one likes change. No one likes to do something that feels. But I think my wife said when we started plugging in vehicles, it was it feels like going to a petrol station and putting petrol into your car just feels like we should be past that by now. So we shouldn't be doing that by now. We should be past it. There's a better way, and it just feels old. And it's like once people start to think, what am I doing? I'm actually going there and filling up my vehicle with 80 litres of flammable liquid hydrocarbons that are bad for the environment, are bad for global warming. And once that starts to click, and the charging infrastructure becomes more and more, but critically, it's the choice of vehicle, because at the moment, for what I do a lot of the time in my vehicles, I drive everything. I've driven everything from I've had several Rangers, custom Transits, and various PHEVs and Fiestas. I've 14 Fiestas, which are absolutely phenomenal cars. I would always recommend to anyone that Fiesta is just go for it. But you still need them to do things. And at the moment, for the stuff I do in the winter that I may have a Ranger for, there is no EV that will do that job for me. So I have to go and sort of pick up logs and other bits and pieces like that. There's not an EV that does that. So once the bandwidth of vehicles come out, and you'll see, and they will be different, sort of maybe more built off of dedicated platforms like Audi have done, and others are doing, and VW doing. That you're going, okay, well, it's not going to be what powertrain it is. It doesn't matter, because they all do what I want them to do. They all carry the stuff I want. They will all fit my family in. They'll all go as roughly as far as I want. It's just a little, I have to plug this one at home, and this one I have to take to the petrol station. So I think once you get that breadth of offering, which will be coming. I don't know how much you know about the European CO2 fleet regulations,
not much,
and how not much. So I won't talk about it. There's an awful lot of information if you want to get into the technical details on the EU Commission website, and understand exactly how that works. But effectively, vehicle OEMs have a target of what their fleet CO2 needs to be, and as that it goes lower and lower and lower and lower, they need to do more and more efficient vehicles, and a big chunk of that is having EVs. And you'd start off with at the moment, batteries are still expensive, and the total cost of ownership might be lower on par with a diesel if you take it out far enough, maybe 4 or 5 years. But it's not. It's still that mindset of it's still a big upfront cost. It's still all of these things. But once it starts to get closer and closer, and the barriers to entry and the breadth of vehicles are out there, I think it'll be a fairly easy change for most people. Okay. And I think the early adopters have been brilliant. They are brilliant what's they called, cheerleaders for it, and are going, yes, it's brilliant to do. And in many cases, beta testers, Tesla owners, going back to Tesla, but you'd love Tesla customers. They will go out and test your new ideas for you and give you honest feedback. This is an incredible thing they've got going. It's great. It's great. It's really fascinating time to be part of the industry.
I mean, for any OEMs out there who are listening, I'm happy to accept vehicles for beta testing. Just as long as they're electric.
There are not many OEMs, startups or otherwise, who would give beta testing into the hands of customers. You have to be very, 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 very confident your customers won't turn that around on you. And Elon Musk is one of those people who is very, very confident that the people who want to be beta testers, and this comes from the software. He's looking at it from a software mindset. Where people are happy to test it out and see what it's like, and they're out there the autopilot, which is really, really interesting what they're doing and the data they're gathering. Very, very interesting to watch.
Nice. I still wonder what my, just looking around on my street, because I like to kind of look at the sort of not just my own point of view, because I'm in my own EV bubble, as you know. But I don't think there is anybody else on my street, and there's about 40, 50 houses here owning an EV. There's more and more EVs around the area, but I think we're past the point where it's just enthusiasts doing it. I think there's more people who, certainly the people who bought my Leaf, have never owned an EV before, and they just want a second car that's cheap and certainly has enough mileage to do like 10-20 miles a day to do a school run, and any EV that's been out for the last 10 years is probably sufficient for that. But I wonder what it will take to transition people like my neighbors, for instance, who've got 3 Fords on their drive at the moment, and they always buy second-hand cars, which goes to your back to your point about affordability. What will it take for them to actually get into EV? Because I don't think the range is a problem anymore with all the offerings. I think it's the mission statement or the mission that a car can fulfill. So given my example, for instance, we have a Kia e-Niro now, and that's not the best-selling car from Kia. The best-selling car from Kia is actually Sportage, which is slightly bigger than this. And I wonder why they're not putting out an EV version of it, for instance, given that they'll be selling loads of them, far more than e-Niros. And obviously that goes for every OEM. Like, some people have a family with 5 kids, and they want to have a car that can carry that.
So say, why wouldn't the Sportage? And it may come down to something as fundamental as sort of platform engineering. Is that I don't know enough off the top of my head about the Kia, the platform, but if it's on a different platform, on an older version of the platform, it may not be at the moment time in its life cycle that you're going to scrap that $1 billion worth of tooling you've laid down for one shape of vehicle to do another one. Yeah. So it may be just from their own internal cycle planning and their internal timings and development phases that actually the Niro version on the platform that's on came out first, because that's just where it was in its life cycle, and then the Sportage. I think every OEM has made it fairly clear they're going to be bringing out an EV version of whatever they do.
A good driver stops near the curb, and with the restart he gets away smoothly.
And I'll be really, really surprised if, for instance, Sportage didn't share a lot with the petrol or diesel version of Niro. So that's what I mean. Like, why not offer, if changing the powertrain or the drivetrain into powertrain it's easy enough, why not just design it to be available across the line? Or maybe it's because it was designed in 2014-15 and they haven't seen the uptake to be as high as
it's not necessarily easy, depending on, you've almost got sort of three routes that people are looking at. You've got your gasoline internal combustion engine platform that has various things you need to package: the big engine at the front, big chunk of metal, and all the crash structure that goes with having all of that metal in front of your driver's knees. That makes the vehicle look one way. You also then need to package a tank that can hold your hydrocarbons underneath the vehicle, and then your exhaust and all the cooling and everything else like that. You've then got a mixed fuel, mixed power platform, which is what the Nero is. It can do a lot of these other it can do everything. It's got hybrids, non-hybrids, BEVs. It's got the whole gamut of things you can do. Yeah. But they will have in that platform, because you are having to package and having to work with and cool and crash such a wide range of, because a battery and electric motor is very, very different to package and to cool and to all of the other things you'd need to do with it than an internal combustion engine. It's very, very different. So you have a platform there, and some platforms intrinsically might be easy to do that with if it hasn't been ground up, designed to be a dual power platform. But that will have a certain amount of compromise had. So a Nero won't be the best packaged EV it could possibly be, because that same platform, which it shares parts with, will also have to have an internal combustion engine in.
Or be a hybrid, which is probably even more complicated.
Or be a hybrid, yeah, where you've got a lot of the other, you've got the battery, and you've got the internal combustion, you've got the whole load of stuff, and that's before you even start thinking about hydrogen fuel, which is there's a whole other stuff. So you've got this slightly compromised but a great stepping stone, and it's a halfway where you can got this part going back to what you're saying about how are you going to get customers into that. If they go into the showroom and they go, I was looking at the petrol Nero, it's really nice, I like it, it does what I want it to do. And so, well, here's the electric one. And they go, wait a minute, it's basically the same. So it's a great way to sort of get those customers in. And then on the other side, you've got the dedicated BEV platforms, the MQB, the various ones that Tesla have, and all the OEMs will be developing their own version of a dedicated BEV platform, and that then blank sheet of paper. You don't have to package a massive chunk of incompressible metal in front of the driver anymore. You don't have to worry about where your exhaust is going to go. You don't have to worry about all of these all of the things that would have added cost and weight to potentially a dedicated EV. That a lot of those constraints would go away. That doesn't mean that some of the dual power and dual energy platforms aren't very, very, very good. It depends on the situation. If you're in North America and you've got a pickup truck, actually, because of the way it's a body on frame and your rails, doesn't really matter whether you put a battery there or an engine.
It's a massive amount of space.
It's a lot. There's a lot. You've got a lot of space. You've got a bit more space to play with. And it's not as easy. Where if you're in a B car, it's a bit more difficult. Yeah. So I think it's those things and those stepping stones, and it will be gradual for some people. And I know there's a lot of hate goes against PHEVs, but people who are worried about range. And I've got a PHEV, on the driveway at the moment. People who are worried about range are worried about a lot of the things you would worry about as an EV. Those things that think, I could never do that. Where am I going to charge it? Once you actually get one and realise, I'm actually driving this for 95% of the time on electric, and it's only got a 45-mile range. You go, well, the next one, if I've got an electric with 200-mile range, that's absolutely fine. And it's taking customers on a journey, because people who love EVs and EV enthusiasts are 10 5 10 15-20% of the market. There's still an awful lot of people there that need to go on that journey and are very comfortable with what they've driven for their entire life, and you're suddenly saying, no, it's completely different. But it isn't actually that. In their head they think it's different, but it's not actually. It's a little bit different, but there's benefits to it. So it's taking people on that journey, and I think podcasts like yours and a lot of the mainstream stuff and a lot of advocates for it are great at doing that.
Take It EV podcast. Everyone's invited.
Why did the electric car finish the race early?
Had a short circuit. Booyah!
Because at the end of the day, it's all about engineering. You know, whatever the industry is, when you're creating something from scratch, it's usually engineering.
And the process of the process of going from idea to production of an ICE vehicle is broadly the same as an electric vehicle from a pure engineering perspective.
Okay.
But with the electric vehicle, you might need to think as you know, you're seeing with the startups, is a lot more the services and other things that go in and around it, which is a lot more sort of the business side of it, and you've got more software involved. But fundamentally, you are still designing and sending out the door a four wheels, powertrain, body, interior. It's all the same stuff, and a lot of the time, the really difficult stuff to get right is what. You know, is how your door closes, is your windows going up and down right, is your switch gear, is panel gaps. I know it's like the traditional thing but the OEMs that are really good at doing panel gaps, that's not by accident. That's because people have spent thousands of hours working out how to do that on every single panel.
Yeah.
Going through it, making sure your engineering documentation is in place, is making sure your production processes are spot on, to make sure your gauge R&Rs, everything, all these core fundamental engineering disciplines that go into making any product go into that. So in a lot of the way, an EV and a gas, it's just what turns the wheels. They're very, very similar. And I think that's what it's been interesting to see some of the startups making that jump, making that move from one to the other, and finding that that's actually quite difficult. But we all take it for granted that, well, of course they're going to engineer that properly, do a good job of that, but without forgetting sometimes quite, you know, the amount of work and knowledge and background and skill that goes into actually doing it. Sort of take it for granted, it just happens.
Take It EV podcast. We talk about EVs from the heart.
We are the podcast about the EVs, where we don't just self-charge, but we also plug in.
They'll get there. If you look at the teardown of even the Model, the Model S to the Model 3, and how they bolt even something as simple as the body panels together. You know, they've started using the same type of fasteners rather than 15 different types of fasteners to help. Just things like that are going through. So I wouldn't take it for granted that suddenly, you know, tests are always going to be bad quality, even if, you know, a Model S isn't quite up there with a Porsche just yet. But that's not to say that they won't be. They're shown they can learn fast and everything. Yeah. So I wouldn't take it. No, I don't think no one's taking it for granted. I'm sure CEO of VW in North America, he was always very, whenever he's on TV on an interview, he's always very complimentary of Tesla and the other startups that are coming through.
Yeah, I mean they Tesla, at least when it comes to powertrains, are way ahead of the competition, and obviously all the time and effort that they put into it, they couldn't have spent on other things. So that's obviously understandable. People who care about for these things, they don't care as much about the panel gaps or squeaks in in the dashboard. Although I have to say, between the Model S that I've driven, 90-something thousand pound car, that when I accelerated, the dashboard was squeaking, to the Model 3 that I drove, a couple of years later, there's been a massive shift in the quality of the interior and the fit and finish.
But you see how fast even the Chinese OEMs are catching up. No, not. I think was it 6 or 7 years ago when I think Top Gear and Clarkson went out there and almost were joking about the quality of the vehicles out there. You go out there now, they are learning. People learn fast. People are the smart people out there looking at what they're going to catch up. So no OEM can rest. Even Tesla can't rest on the laurels that they're going to be the top of the EV tree, and because you've got other innovative people coming in and coming up with good ideas and doing it differently and always innovating, which is brilliant because it means everybody is pushed to innovate. The more ideas and everything you've coming into the system, the more everybody's forced to do better. It brings everybody up, and that means we can do it faster. We can get you'll be able to get EVs that have better range, or will be cheaper. All of the innovation that comes with it always just gets bundled up, which is great. So I spend big chunks of my time at work doing research and reading stuff on other OEMs, and I come home and do it for fun as well. So I spend an inordinate amount of time just reading stuff about different things and teardowns and information and press releases and all of that, which is it's quite fun.
Well, friends, this is where I'm going to have to cut it. The reminder of this conversation is going to be available in the next episode, which is going to come out pretty soon. So just stay tuned. And remember, take it easy on Twitter and have a look at the show notes. See ya.